some och fanns som ville pas exister en groupe.
I never believed in Bigfoot, not even a little. I figured folks who claimed to have seen him were either seeking attention or had mistaken a bear for something more mysterious. I was the practical type. A retired school teacher, I'd lived alone in my cabin for 23 years after my husband passed. Out in the woods, miles from the nearest town, I liked the quiet. I liked being alone with my memories and my routines. All that changed last fall. What I'm about to tell you sounds impossible. Part of me still can't believe it happened, but it did. Every word is true, and I've kept it secret for months because who would believe me? Even now, sharing this feels dangerous somehow, like I'm betraying a trust. But recent events, my health primarily, have made me realize I need to tell someone before it's too late. Not for me, but for what this means. For what's out there that we don't understand. My son visited in October. He's in his 40s now, lives 3 hours away in the city with his wife and kids. Good man, worries too much. He'd been after me for years to move closer to them, maybe into one of those assisted living places. Said I was too old to manage out here on my own. I told him the same thing every time. This was my home. Every corner held a memory of his father. The porch where we watched the sunsets, the kitchen where we'd dance while making dinner, the bedroom where I held his hand in those last days. I wasn't leaving. We argued about it on that visit, not loudly, but that kind of tense disagreement where both people try to keep it civil, and that just makes everything worse. He was frustrated, I was stubborn. Looking back, I understand his concern better now. But at the time, all I could think was that this was my life, and I'd live it on my terms. The afternoon before he was supposed to leave, he decided to cut firewood. Winter was coming on, and my pile was getting low. I appreciated the help even though I didn't say it. I went out to stack the pieces as he split them. We worked mostly in silence, that uncomfortable quiet after an argument. That's when my leg gave out, just like that. 1 minute I was bending to pick up a log. The next I was on the ground. A sharp pain shot up from my ankle. I heard my son cry out. I felt his hands under my arms, trying to help me up. The pain was bad, very bad. I could barely put any weight on it. He wanted to take me straight to the hospital. He started talking about broken bones and how I might need surgery. I refused. I told him it was just a sprain, that I'd be fine with some ice and rest. The truth was, I hated hospitals. Too many bad memories of when my husband got sick. Besides, I was making a point. See, I can take care of myself here. Stupid pride. We came to an agreement. He'd drive into town, get supplies and pain medication from the pharmacy. I promised to stay put and rest. He made me swear I wouldn't try to walk on it. I agreed, just so he'd stop hovering. He left around 3 p.m., said he'd be back in a couple of hours. After his truck disappeared down the dirt road, the quiet settled back in. I was sitting on the wooden bench by the woodpile, my ankle propped up on a log. The pain had receded to a dull throb. I felt foolish and old and angry with myself for falling, angry at my body for failing me, angry at my son for being right that I needed help. I must have been sitting there for 20 minutes just staring at the tree line and feeling sorry for myself. That's when I noticed movement at the edge of the woods, about 50 yards away. Something dark moving between the pines. My first thought was bear. We had them sometimes, especially in the fall when they were bulking up for winter. I tensed up, looking around for something to bang together if I needed to scare it off. But then, the way it moved registered in my brain. Wrong gait, too upright. Bears don't walk like that. Here's something I haven't mentioned yet. Over the years living here, I'd seen things. Flashes, shadows that moved wrong, shapes that didn't quite fit. Always at dusk or dawn, always at a distance. I'd convince myself each time it was my eyes playing tricks, the light hitting a tree stump strangely, a deer standing on its hind legs to reach leaves. Your mind fills in the blanks with what makes sense, and Bigfoot doesn't make sense, so I'd file those moments away and forget them. But now, in broad daylight, with nowhere to run because of my injured ankle, I couldn't look away. I couldn't make excuses. The thing, creature, whatever it was, stepped out from behind a big pine. Even from that distance, I could see it was massive, 7 feet tall at least, maybe 8, covered in dark brown fur that caught the afternoon light. It walked on 2 legs, like a human, but nothing like a human. The proportions were wrong. Arms too long, shoulders too wide. It was walking directly toward me. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but I couldn't. My ankle could barely take standing, let alone running. I thought of the pieces of firewood scattered around me. I pictured trying to defend myself with a log against something that size. The absurdity of it almost made me laugh, except I was too terrified. The creature stopped about 10 feet away, just stood there looking at me. And that's when everything I thought I knew about the world shifted, because its eyes, I could see its eyes clearly. They weren't animal eyes. There was something else there. Intelligence, awareness. It was looking at me the way a person looks at another person. Studying, thinking. We stood there for what felt like hours, but was probably only a minute. Neither of us moved, neither of us looked away. I became aware of how vulnerable I was. Injured, alone, no weapon of any consequence. If this thing wanted to hurt me, I couldn't stop it. Stop. The thought should have terrified me more than it did, but something about the way it stood there, patient, curious, not aggressive, kept panic from fully taking hold. Then it spoke. One word, deep voice, heavily accented but clear as a bell. Hurt. I stopped breathing. My brain couldn't process what I'd just heard. Animals don't talk. They can't form words. This was impossible. I stared at it, mouth agape, unable to respond. It tilted its head slightly, the way a dog does when it's trying to understand something. Then it repeated the word, more slowly this time. Hurt. I found my voice, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. I told it. Yes, my leg. I fell. The words felt ridiculous coming out of my mouth. I was having a conversation with Bigfoot. This wasn't real. It couldn't be real. The creature nodded, a slow, deliberate nod that was so human it sent shivers down my spine. Then, without another word, it turned and walked back into the woods. In seconds, it had disappeared among the trees, moving so quietly I couldn't even hear its footsteps. I just sat there alone, staring at the spot where it had vanished. My hands were shaking. I tried to convince myself I'd imagined it all. Pain medication? No, I hadn't taken any yet. Sunstroke? It was autumn, barely 15 degrees. I ran through every rational explanation I could think of, and none of them fit. That thing had been real. It had spoken to me, and then it had just left. My son returned an hour later with a bag from the pharmacy full of supplies. He helped me inside, bandaged my ankle, got me settled on the couch with ice and pain pills. Over dinner, soup he'd bought from the diner in town, he brought up the subject of me moving again, said this proved he was right. What if I'd been alone? What if it had been worse? I listened to him talk and realized I couldn't tell him what had happened, not because he wouldn't believe me, though that was part of it, but because I didn't want to share it yet. I didn't want to hear someone tell me I'd been confused or scared or seeing things. The experience felt too big, too strange, too important to have someone else's doubts spilled all over it. So, when he pressed me about moving, I did something I rarely did. I lied. I told him I'd think about it, that maybe he was right. That calmed him. He left the next morning believing he'd accomplished something, that I was finally coming around, and I was left alone with my bandaged ankle, my silent pain, and the impossible memory of what I had seen. The first few days were rough. The ankle kept me mostly indoors. I knew I shouldn't put weight on it, but I also knew I needed to move a little or I'd go crazy. So I hobbled from room to room, leaning on furniture and walls, feeling frustrated by my own weakness. I kept looking out the windows into the woods, half expecting to see something, half dreading it. On the third day after my son left, I was sitting on the front porch. Midday, clear sky, hardly any wind. I'd managed to get down the steps using the railing for support, determined to get some fresh air and sun. My ankle throbbed, but it was bearable if I didn't move much. I had a cup of tea, a blanket over my lap, and a book I pretended to read but mostly found myself staring into space. That's when I saw her again, emerging from the woods, walking with that impossible gait I now recognized. My whole body tensed, the mug in my hand trembled, spilling a little tea onto the blanket. The creature stopped at the edge of the clearing, about 30 feet away, closer than last time, close enough to see details I'd missed before. Her fur wasn't uniformly brown. There were red highlights in it where the sun hit, and darker patches around her face and hands. Her fingers were long, almost human-like, but thicker, with what looked like black nails. Her face was a mix of human and ape, neither one thing nor the other. Wide nose, deep-set eyes under a prominent brow, a jaw that jutted out slightly. But those eyes looked at me with an awareness that made my skin crawl. We looked at each other for a long moment. Then, very slowly, the creature squatted down. The movement was deliberate, not menacing. She stayed there, still 30 feet away, now more at my eye level instead of looming over me. I understood what she was doing. She was making herself less intimidating, trying to show me she wasn't a threat. My pulse was still racing, but the pure terror had receded to something more like nervous awe. I swallowed, tried to make my voice work. "Hello," I said. The word came out raspy. I tried again. "Hello?" The creature tilted her head, that dog-like expression of curiosity again. Then she made a sound back. Not a word exactly, but a soft, low murmur in her throat. A kind of acknowledgement. I don't know what made me do the next thing. Maybe it was the way she had squatted. Maybe it was the human need to connect, to communicate. I slowly raised my hand and pointed to my ankle. "Still hurt," I said. "But better." Better than before, the creature looked where I pointed. Her gaze lingered on the bandage wrapping my ankle, then moved back to my face. She nodded once. "Good," she said, that deep, accented voice. "Good, that better." I felt tears prick my eyes. I don't know why. Maybe it was the relief of not being crazy, that this was real and happening again. Maybe it was just the sheer strangeness of it. A creature that was supposed to not exist, showing concern for my well-being. We sat like that for perhaps 10 minutes, me in my porch chair with my spilled tea and forgotten book. The creature squatting at the edge of the woods, watching me with that steady, intelligent gaze. Neither of us moved much. It was as if we both knew that sudden movement might break this fragile moment of connection. Finally, the creature stood up. My heart leaped again, but she stayed where she was. "Come back," she said. 2 words, clearly spoken. Then she turned and walked back into the woods. This time I watched her go until she disappeared completely. I stayed on the porch until the chill made my ankle ache too much, then hobbled back inside. I could barely sleep that night. I kept replaying the interaction in my mind, the way she had squatted, the care in her movements, the words, "come back," that promised another meeting. She came again, 2 days later. Late afternoon this time, just before sunset. I was sitting in the same spot, waiting without admitting to myself that I was waiting. When I saw her emerging from the woods, my breath caught in my throat, but not with fear. It was almost anticipation. This time she came closer, only 15 feet from the porch. She squatted down again, settled into a sitting position with her legs crossed. The posture was so oddly human, I had to suppress a nervous laugh. "Hello," I said again. It was becoming our greeting. She nodded, that slow, deliberate gesture. "Hello," she repeated back. "Can I ask you something?" I said. My voice was firmer now, more confident. The creature waited, watching. "What are you? I mean, do you have a name for what you are?" She thought about this. I could see her thinking, her eyes moving slightly as she processed the question. "Different names," she said finally. "Different peoples call different things. That made sense, I supposed." For centuries, cultures all over the world had had stories of creatures like this. Sasquatch, Bigfoot, Yeti, hundreds of names for something that was perhaps the same thing, or maybe different things. What did I know? "Can I call you friend?" I asked. Another pause. Then, to my surprise, something that might have been a smile. Hard to tell with that facial structure, but her eyes softened somehow. "Friend," she repeated. "Yes, friend, good." And so began the strangest chapter of my life. Over the next few weeks, as my ankle slowly healed, the creature came to visit me almost every day. Sometimes early in the morning, sometimes at dusk, never during the middle of the day, never when the sun was high. Always the same routine, emerging from the woods, approaching the porch, sitting at a distance that gradually shortened as we both grew more comfortable. We talked, or tried to talk. Her command of English was limited, fragmented. Short words and phrases mostly. But we communicated more than just words, gestures, expressions, the shared language of two beings trying to understand each other. I told her about my life, about teaching, about my husband, about raising my son, about the years of loneliness after my husband died. She listened to it all, her ancient, intelligent eyes focused on me in a way that made me feel truly seen for the first time in years. In return, she shared fragments of her own existence. She spoke of the woods, of living alone, of hiding from humans, of watching the world change from a distance. When I asked her how long she had lived here, she thought for a long time. "Many seasons," she finally said, "more than big trees." She gestured to an old pine that must have been at least 200 years old. Older than that. I couldn't wrap my mind around it. I asked if there were others like her. Her expression, which I had learned to read a little, turned sad. "Before," she said, "now alone." I didn't press. I could feel the pain behind those words. My ankle gradually improved. By the 4th week, I could walk without a limp, though I was still cautious with it. My son called every few days, asking how I was, reminding me about moving closer. I told him I was fine, that I was thinking about it. The lies became easier, because how could I explain this to him? How could I tell him I was having daily conversations with a mythical creature, that I had befriended Bigfoot? One afternoon, the creature, my friend, arrived earlier than usual. The sun was still high, warming the autumn air to something almost comfortable. I was in the garden trying to gather the last of the herbs before the frost hit. I saw her approaching and waved, a gesture that had become natural. She hesitated at the edge of the clearing, not advancing as usual. Something about her body language seemed different, more cautious. "What's wrong?" I asked. She was silent for a moment, then said, "Want to see?" The words were uncertain, as if she wasn't sure how I would receive the offer. "See what?" I asked. "Home," she said. "Where I live. I can show, if you want." My pulse quickened. I'd read enough books about Bigfoot to know that no one, at least no one who had lived to tell the tale, claimed to have seen where these creatures lived. It was the ultimate mystery, the best-kept secret. And she was offering to show me. "Yes," I said without thinking. "Yes, I want to see." She nodded, then looked at my ankle. "Can you walk?" "Not far. Distance." "I can walk," I assured her. My ankle was still a little weak, but curiosity outweighed caution. "Good. Come." She turned and started walking into the woods. I followed, a mix of excitement and nervousness churning in my stomach. I was leaving my property, venturing into unknown territory, with a creature who, for all I knew, might be leading me to who knows where for who knows what reason. But I didn't believe that. Over the weeks of our visits, she had shown nothing but kindness, care, something that felt like genuine friendship. I trusted her in a way I couldn't quite explain. We walked for maybe half an hour, venturing deeper into the woods. She went slowly, checking frequently to make sure I could keep up. When the terrain became difficult, she waited for me, sometimes offering her hand to help me over rocks or fallen logs. Her hand was enormous, twice the size of mine, covered in that dark brown fur. The skin on her palm was thick, calloused, warm. Eventually, we reached a section of the woods I'd never seen before. The terrain was rockier here, with outcroppings jutting out from among the trees. She led me to what at first looked like just another rock wall. But then I saw the opening, a crack in the rock just barely wide enough for her to slip through sideways. "Here," she said. She slid through the opening, then waited on the other side. I hesitated only a moment, then followed. The inside was larger than I expected. A cave, basically, but not a natural cave. Parts of it seemed to have been enlarged, shaped. Light filtered in from several cracks in the rock ceiling, illuminating the space with a dim glow. The floor was covered with soft hides, moss, leaves. There was a circle of stones in one corner where she evidently made fires. Tools of some kind, sticks and stones arranged along one wall, bones, clean and white, piled in another corner, perhaps for purposes I couldn't guess. "This is your home," I said quietly. "Yes," she replied. "Home, where I sleep, where safe." I walked slowly around the space, trying not to touch anything but wanting to see everything. It was primitive, yes, but there was an order to it, a system. This wasn't just an animal seeking shelter. This was someone who had created a home. "How long have you lived here?" I asked. "Many seasons," she said again. That was her answer for everything time-related. I realized she probably didn't count years the way I did. She showed me different things, explaining in her limited English what they were for. The hides were from deer she had hunted, the tools for cutting and scraping, the bones from meals, kept because they were useful in ways she tried to show me, but I didn't quite understand. She invited me to sit, and I did, settling onto the hides that were surprisingly soft and comfortable. She sat opposite me, legs crossed, that strangely human posture again. We sat in silence for a while. It wasn't awkward, just two friends sharing space. Eventually I spoke. "Why did you show me this?" I asked. "No one knows about this place, right?" "No," she said. "Only me." "Now you... Why me?" She thought about this. "You alone," she said finally, "like me. You understand. You not scared. And you..." She searched for the word kind. "You not hurt. Only seen," that got to me. She had been watching me, probably for a lot longer than I had realized. Watching me live my solitary life in that cabin. She had judged me worthy of trust. The thought made me feel humbled and honored at the same time. "I would never hurt you," I said. "I would never tell anyone about you. I promise." She nodded. "I know." That why show we stayed perhaps another hour, just sitting together in that hidden cave. I pointed at things, and she named them in her language, sounds I couldn't begin to replicate. Then I said them in English, and she repeated after me, practicing. It was strange and wonderful all at once. Eventually the light filtering through the cracks began to dim. "I need to go back," I said, "before it gets too dark." "I take you," she said. And she did, guiding me back through the woods by a slightly different route than we had come. When we reached the edge of my property, she stopped. "Tomorrow," she said. "Come back?" "Yes," I told her, "please." After that night, something shifted between us. The barriers had come down. We became more comfortable, more open. She started coming not just to the porch, but sometimes closer to the cabin. One night, when it was raining, She even came inside for a moment, though I could tell it made her feel trapped, uncomfortable. The interior space wasn't for her. I learned more about her slowly, piece by piece. I never pushed for information. I let her share when she was ready. I learned that she ate mostly plants, roots, berries, mushrooms, meat sometimes when she could hunt, but preferably not. I learned that she had seen humans many times over the years, but had always hidden. Not out of fear exactly, but out of caution. Humans were unpredictable, dangerous. I learned that she felt lonely. That part emerged slowly in fragments. "You miss have others your kind?" I asked one afternoon. "Yes," she said simply, "but all gone. Long time." "Don't know where family?" I asked softly. "Yes, mother, brothers, all gone." I didn't ask how they were gone. I could hear the pain in her voice. Instead, I told her about losing my husband, about how the first few years after his death felt like I was only half living, just going through the motions, how it had taken 2 decades for this place to feel like a home instead of a place to hide. "I understand," she said. And I think she did. We shared that grief, that loneliness. Perhaps that's why we had connected. 2 solitary beings finding solace in each other's company. Winter came early that year. Mid-November, we had our first heavy snowfall. I woke up to 6 inches on the ground and more falling. The world was silent, muffled by white. I wondered if my friend would still come. She did. Late in the afternoon, emerging from the woods like a dark shadow against the snow. But she looked different. She moved more slowly. When she approached, I could see she was shivering slightly. "Are you okay?" I called from the porch. She nodded, but not convincingly. "Cold," she said. "Winter hard." Something twisted in my chest. "Wait here," I said. I ran inside, or as much as I could run with my ankle still somewhat weak. I grabbed blankets from my linen closet, all the spare blankets I had. I carried them outside, dropped them on the porch steps. "Take these," I said. "They'll keep you warm." She looked at them, then at me. "For me?" "For you," I confirmed. "Please. I can't bear to think of you freezing out there." Slowly, she approached. She picked up the blankets, held them against herself. "Soft," she said, "warm." "There's more inside if you need them," I said. "And food. If you're hungry, I can make something." She shook her head. "Not take what, not mine," she said, clear, firm words. "It's yours if I give it to you," I argued. "It's a gift." Friends give gifts. I saw her struggle with this. Finally, she nodded. "Gift. Thank you." She took the blankets and disappeared into the woods. I saw her again 2 days later. The blankets were visibly dirtier, but clearly cherished. She timidly asked if I had more. I gave her everything I could spare without freezing myself. In the following days, I started leaving food out too. Bread I'd baked, vegetables from my root cellar, jars of preserves. At first, she was shy about taking them, but gradually she accepted that this was what friends did. They looked out for each other. The winter was hard on both of us. I wasn't as young as I used to be, and the cold mornings made my joints ache in ways they hadn't before. But I had my cabin, my wood stove, my supplies. She had a cold cave, and what she could forage. I saw her struggling, saw her grow thinner as the weeks went by. It broke my heart. In January, during a particularly bad snowstorm, she didn't come for almost a week. I worried. I worried so much, I considered going into the woods to look for her, but I knew I'd get lost in the snow, probably freeze. All I could do was wait. When she finally appeared, she looked bad, moving slowly, shivering violently. She collapsed near the porch, barely able to squat. "Oh God," I breathed. I ran down the steps, not caring about my ankle, not caring about my own cold. "Come on," I said. "Inside." "Now can't," she whispered. "Too small. Trapped." "We'll try," I insisted. "Please." "You'll die out there." I managed to guide her onto the porch. She couldn't fit through the door, but the porch had a windbreak that blocked the worst of the wind. I brought out all the blankets I had, my sleeping bag, my heaviest quilt. I piled them on her. I lit my kerosene lamp and set it nearby for heat. I brought hot water from inside in a large bowl. "Drink," I ordered. "Warm yourself inside." She drank, trembling hands holding the bowl. I could hear her teeth chattering. I stayed with her all night. I only went inside to refill the bowl with hot water and bring more blankets. When her shivering finally stopped, when her breathing became more steady, I allowed myself to rest a little. I fell asleep, curled up against her, sharing warmth, two lonely beings keeping each other alive. By morning, she was gone. The blankets were neatly folded on the porch, but she came back that night and the next and the next. The porch became a regular meeting place on colder nights. I couldn't bring her fully inside, but we could share that in-between space, that place between her world and mine. We talked more during those long winter nights, about the universe, about death, about what it meant to be alive. Her perspective was so different from mine. She hadn't believed in any afterlife. "When we die," she said, "we go back to the forest. We feed the trees. The trees feed other animals. Cycle continues. Always part of forest." It was simple, beautiful, very different from the religious promises I'd grown up with about heaven and the hereafter. "Are you afraid of dying?" I asked. "No," she said. "Afraid of pain, yes. Afraid of being alone when it happens, yes. But death itself, no, just change." I told her about holding my husband's hand when he died, about how it was peaceful in the end, but how those last few days were torture watching him fade away. "You were not alone," she said. "Had you?" "Good. Who will be with you?" I asked softly. She was silent for a long time. "No one," she finally said. "Always thought no one. Now, you." "Yes," I promised. "If I can. If you let me, would let you," she said. "Would be good. Die with friend." The conversation stayed with me. It made me think about my own mortality, about how much time I had left. I was over 70. My ankle had healed, but it was a reminder that my body was breaking down. How many more winters did I have? How many more springs? Spring finally came, slowly undoing winter's grip. The snow melted, the trees budded, the birds returned, and my friend seemed to come alive with the forest. The warmth made her happy. We spent hours outside, her teaching me about plants I had never noticed, showing me signs of animals I had always overlooked. The woods became alive in new ways under her guidance. I realized I was becoming dependent on our meetings. I lived for seeing her, for our conversations. When my son called, we talked less. When he suggested visiting, I found reasons to postpone, not because I didn't love him, but because I didn't want to disrupt this strange and precious thing I had found. I wondered what my friend was going through. Did she feel the same connection? She seemed to. She came more and more frequently, stayed longer. One afternoon she said something that surprised me. "In all my life," she said slowly, choosing her words carefully, "never friend before. Not like you. Never talk to another. Not my kind. Only watch, hide. You first. You change everything." "Change how?" I asked. "Make loneliness feel less," she said. "Make world feel less empty." Now I understand why humans live together, why need others, before thought weakness. Now understand different. Strength too. Connection makes strong tears welled up in my eyes. "You changed me too," I told her. "I've been hiding here for years. I thought I was okay with the solitude, but it was just fear. Fear of losing someone again. You showed me it's worth the risk." We were sitting on the porch, the sun setting, painting the sky pink and orange. She reached out her hand, enormous and furred. I took it. We sat like that until the stars came out, hands clasped, two improbable souls who had found solace in each other's company. Summer arrived. My days fell into a rhythm. Mornings, tending my garden. Afternoons, waiting for her. Evenings on the porch, talking late. My son called less frequently. He'd accepted I wasn't moving. I stopped feeling guilty about it. This was my life, and I was living it fully for the first time in decades. It was in August that I started feeling unwell. Nothing major at first, just fatigue, loss of appetite. I thought it was the heat. Then I started losing weight. My clothes hung loosely. I felt weak in ways I couldn't explain. My friend noticed before I would admit it. "You changed," she said one afternoon. "Smaller, slower. Something wrong." "Just getting old," I said, trying to laugh. "No," she said firmly. "Different. Sickness." I knew she was right. I'd known for weeks but hadn't wanted to face it. I didn't want to go to doctors, didn't want tests and diagnoses and treatments. I didn't want to spend my remaining time in hospitals being poked and prodded. If I was dying, I wanted to do it here, on my terms. "If it's sickness," I told her, "I'm not going to treat it. I'll stay here, with my woods. With you die," she said. It wasn't a question. "Yes," I said, "maybe soon, maybe not." But yes, she nodded slowly. "I understand. What you choose. I will be here. Promise." The weeks passed. I grew weaker. Walking became difficult. Eating was a challenge. I could feel my body shutting down little by little. But instead of being terrified, I felt grateful for each day. The creature and I spent hours together. She brought me things, interesting rocks, unusual leaves. Once a perfect bird's egg that had fallen from a nest. I told her stories of my life, about teaching, about my husband, about raising my son, about mistakes I had made and things I regretted. She listened to it all without judgment. Sometimes she would nod or make small sounds of acknowledgement. Mostly, she just gave me the gift of being heard, truly heard, by someone who cared. I asked her questions I had held back before about her life, her experiences. She answered more freely now, perhaps sensing this was our last chance. She told me she had lived in these mountains longer than I had been alive. She had seen the forest change, seen humans move in and clear the land and build roads. She had hidden from hunters and hikers and developers. She had survived winters that killed other animals. She had been alone for decades. When I asked if that was difficult, being alone for so long, she thought for a while. Difficult and not difficult. Lonely, yes, but also free. No one to hurt, no one to lose. I understood that. After my husband died, I had felt the same way. Being alone was painful, but safe. You couldn't lose someone if you never let anyone in. But we had both taken the risk, let each other in, and it had been worth it. Worth the pain that would come when we lost each other. Some connections justified the cost. I stopped being afraid of dying sometime during those last weeks. The creature had taught me that death was just transformation, returning to the cycle. My body would break down and feed the forest. My atoms would become part of the trees and the soil and the water. In a real sense, I would never leave this place. There was comfort in that, more comfort than any religious promise of heaven I'd been given. I would literally become part of what I loved, nourish the forest that had nourished me. The creature would walk these woods, and in some small way, I would still be here. I told her this one afternoon. I told her I was no longer afraid, that I was ready. She looked at me with those ancient eyes and said, "Not end, only change." Exactly right. Not an ending, just a change. A state of being shifting to another. The forest had been teaching me this for months. I had just been too human to fully understand it. My son visited one last time about 2 weeks before the end. I could see the shock on his face when he saw how thin I had gotten, how weak. He wanted to take me to the hospital immediately. I refused, told him this was where I wanted to be, where I needed to be. We argued about it, but my mind was made up. Finally, he accepted it. He stayed with me for 3 days. We talked about his childhood, about his father, about good memories. I told him I loved him and was proud of him. I made sure he knew I'd had a good life, that these last few years had been happy. I didn't tell him about the creature, almost did several times, but I had promised that the secret would die with me. After he left, I felt at peace. Everything important had been said, everything necessary had been done. I was ready. That last afternoon was perfect. Clear sky, mild temperature, crickets chirping in the grass. I had forced myself outside one last time, though it took everything I had. I sat on the porch, wrapped in a blanket, watching the sunset. The creature came, sat beside me, closer than ever before, close enough that I could feel the warmth of her body, could smell the earthy animal scent of her. We sat in silence for a long time, watching the sky change from blue to orange, to purple to black, watching the stars emerge one by one, listening to the forest settle down for the night. Eventually I spoke, told her, "Thank you again for everything, for the friendship, for the lessons, for seeing me, for making my last years worth living." She turned to look at me in the darkness. I could barely make out her features, but I felt her attention. "Thank you," she said, "for seeing, for friend, for you." Those words, the same ones I had said, mirrored back, perfect in their simplicity. We sat together until I could no longer stay awake, until the chill had seeped into my bones and my body was ready to shut down. I told the creature I needed to go inside to lie down. She helped me up, steadied me when I swayed, walked with me to the door. I turned in the threshold, looked at this impossible being one last time. "Goodbye, friend." She touched my face softly, a gesture I had seen her do only once before. Then she spoke the longest sentence I had ever heard her utter. "Not goodbye. You stay in forest, in mountain, in sky, always here, always friend," I understood. I would die, but I would not be gone. I would become part of the place. I would remain in her memory and in the earth itself, forever connected to this moment, to this friendship, to this impossible and beautiful truth. I went inside, lay down in my bed. The living room blanket somehow found its way over me, though I didn't remember getting it. Through the window, I could see the silhouette of the creature, keeping watch, guarding. I closed my eyes, let go, slipped into the great cycle, into transformation, into whatever came next, and I was not afraid. You might wonder how you're reading this if I'm dead. Fair question. I wrote most of this in those last weeks. I hid it where my son would eventually find it with instructions not to read it until he was ready. By the time you're hearing this, enough time has passed. The creature is safe. The forest is safe. And maybe the world is ready for this story. Or maybe not. Maybe you'll think I was a crazy old woman hallucinating, making things up. That's okay. Believe what you need to believe. But if there's any part of you that wonders, that thinks maybe this could be true, then take the message. If not the story, the world is bigger than you think, stranger, more mysterious. Make room for wonder. Connection matters more than anything else. Real connection, the kind that requires presence and patience, and the willingness to sit in silence. Let go of what doesn't serve you. Most of what we carry is unnecessary weight. Pay attention. The world is trying to teach you things every moment. You just have to go slow enough to notice. Respect what you don't understand. Just because something is different doesn't make it lesser. Keep some secrets. Not everything needs to be shared. Some things are more valuable when held close. And most importantly, live fully while you can. Don't wait until you're dying to find out what matters. Don't waste decades on things that don't bring you joy or peace or meaning. I found the best friendship of my life in my 70s with a being that was not supposed to exist. I found purpose and peace and presence when I had stopped looking for them. I learned more in 3 years than I had learned in the 70 prior. You don't need to know Sasquatch to have that kind of transformation. You just need to open yourself to the possibility, to truly see what's around you, to connect with the world and the beings in it on a deeper level. That's what I want you to take from this. Not proof of Bigfoot, not a sensational story to share, but a reminder that life can surprise you. That it's never too late to change, that friendship and meaning and magic exist if you're willing to look for them. I lived well, I died in peace, I became part of the forest I loved, and somewhere in those mountains, a creature that shouldn't exist remembers an old woman who saw her, who wasn't afraid, who became her friend. That's enough. That's everything. That's my story. For more interesting stories, check out this.